Alright, Wichimotsu doing a third semantic rant. This one, again, a two-word one because I thought these two words have the same kind of buzz quality with people having negative associations with them, but also there being nuances of them. First word is relativist, also associated relativism, but we'll go with relativist because it can be used as an adjective in a noun. The term relativism, generally in philosophy of any form that people associate with it, tends to imply an all, every way is okay. No truth. I'm trying to think of a term for it. Basically, no holds barred. That's a good term for it. And always lead to the same God. Technically that's another term entirely, but people associate it with just very much inclusiveness and openness. But there are actually two kinds. And I'll just use the one that tends to be used, the distinction that tends to be used commonly, and that's hard and soft relativism. Hard relativism actually makes the claim there is no truth. There are no absolutes. And of course, then there's the logical turnaround that isn't saying there are no absolutes, an absolute statement in and of itself. And of course, the hard relativist anyway, can turn that around and say, well, we're in a relative framework, so even that statement is technically relative. Provisional statements and all. I might get into that later in another rant of sorts. But then we have soft relativism, which simply says that there is no absolute truth in the fullness of our own knowledge because of the fact that we always take things into consideration based upon limited amounts of knowledge anyway. Albeit, this is also equivalent to a form of methodological agnosticism, rather, where we have the notion that our own limitations of knowledge say we cannot make absolute statements. Within soft relativism, it seems to imply at least a similar nuanced idea that we have to consider context, we have to consider culture, but to make this polarizing idea that there is no truth whatsoever is unfair to a soft relativist in that, well, of course, it's an absolute. If you're trying to make an absolute statement or that sort of statement, of course you're going to kind of shoot yourself in the foot a little bit. So a soft relativist says, well, we have to consider that perhaps the term truth is relative to culture. It's not relative in terms of being anything goes. That was the term I was looking for. Anything goes. They're not saying anything goes. They're simply saying we have to consider things relative to who is claiming them, why they're claiming them, what context they're coming from, those sorts of things. Now that we're done with relativism, we go to a more buzzy buzzword, and that is humanist, which again can be used as an adjective or a noun, but humanistic might be the more appropriate adjective term, but we're just going to go with humanist. The term seems to go in at least three ways, potentially, but there's at least an initial dichotomy that's made between religious humanism and secular humanism. Religious humanism being much more complicated to describe than secular humanism, which makes more kind of basic statements. Secular humanism is saying simply that we believe that there are some basic principles we have to follow, one of them being secularity, that there are certain things that religion should not be involved in, namely governmental legislation, those sorts of things. And then we have the humanist position, which in terms of secular humanism simply says that makes a similar claim to religious humanism, or philosophical humanism even, that humans are the key focal point within creating values to things and giving meaning to things. To draw meaning from outside human perspective is a bit tricky, mostly because of the fact that, well, everything tends to have a anthropocentric, that is, a human-centered idea. We always kind of draw things from a perspective that humans are the dominant form of life, and we're the ones that you should be concerned with the most. But yeah, we'll get into that later, I imagine. Another rant. I'll have to remind myself of that. But then we have religious humanism, which is an attempt to raise the human condition, you could say, and the human state of existence in general, to a point of ultimate concern, which is how at least I tend to try to define religion, that we're raising something to the level of ultimate concern. In the case of humanism, you're raising those human ideals of reason and general fellowship of your fellow sentient beings, and being considerate to others, being inclusive to the fact that even though we are all humans, we do manifest very different beliefs at times because of our context and that sort of thing, which is how I was trying to connect it to relativism, albeit a more knowledgeable humanist might be able to correct me on these things. I'm perfectly willing to be corrected on my general description of religious humanism, because a lot of people that say they're humanists tend to make that distinction between secular and religious. But I've heard a third definition proposed, and that is just the more an attempt to be a middle ground, or at least actually separate from the dichotomy of religious and secular. And this is the more philosophical humanism that considers philosophy as essentially a human endeavor, that we always are searching for truth, and we're searching for anything within a human perspective. And the only way to really have true philosophical discussion in any sense is to have an exchange between humans, a dialogue, as it were. And I kind of like that too, because the definition that this organization uses in my college, called the Guild of Humanists, tried to make that distinction, because a lot of people make a negative association, or an association that it's very much a kind of irreligious point of view. But you can say it's just philosophical. It doesn't mean that it can be religious. Anyway, those are my little distinctions on semantics, I guess, of these words and such. I hope you enjoyed them. I'm trying to keep these under 10 minutes constantly, so if I seem a little fast, I apologize, but I tend to not have any complaints so far, but I don't have that many subscribers either. So yeah, this is the end of this video. Hope you enjoy, and don't mind the weird video I put to cover it.